Michael, I think one of the most, there's many fascinating things about you, but what is fascinating to me is how someone becomes a shaman by age, I think 33 you are.
I am 33 and I don't know if that's late, early, or right on time. So
Yeah, that might be it. Might be to me. It's like you think of like a shaman, and you imagine I don't know. Maybe the first thing that comes to mind is like some elder person, and here's you. And I know a bit about your background, but I think it would color and make it makes a lot of sense in knowing a little bit about your background, your story, and your journey. So I'd love for you to just share how that comes to be for you a little bit.
sure. So I took a very traditional path for the first 7/8 of my life. Uh, it was grow up, go to school, go to college, go to grad school. Uh, and throughout that time, when I was 14, my dad passed away. He committed suicide. And it put me on this really interesting quest from the age of 14 on to figure out what is the purpose of all of this. And more importantly, what is my purpose? What is my role? How do I want to engage with life? So, coming out of graduate school, where I got my MBA and a Master's of Science in Public Policy, and I was looking at how to do social impact consulting and how to create business for good. Um, I was looking around, and everybody, myself included, had great job offers. People had jobs that would make them money and status and all these things. But I was burnt out, and I was looking around, and I was also seeing this isn't going to make me happy. So I had a kind of background plan in place, but I really spent the first part of that plan taking care of myself, studying yoga, working with the earth, doing natural building and permaculture. And then I also started working with plant medicine. And that was a game changer. And so for really the next 5 years from 2018, late 2018 till now, I did nothing else except for study plant medicine, study how to integrate it, work on coaching, and really try to become a skilled practitioner of what I wanted to put out into the world. But it was really still based in this, how do I want to heal myself? And then that transformed into, how do I want to be of service to others?
So I can imagine having such a traumatic event at such a young age could send you in so many potentially different ways and how you engage with that. And so you I think I read on something that you shared around having a meaninglessness or experiencing like a meaninglessness early on, and I was assuming, was it that time? And I guess I'm just curious, like, do you know that you want to work on yourself, like from that experience of your dad dying, like right away, or did that come through later on in college where you like were like, I need to like do some work on this?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I would have framed it as working on myself at that early stage. I was going through confirmation at the Presbyterian church when my dad committed suicide, and I was going to a private school that had a lot of hierarchy and status dynamics going on. And that traumatic event just made me pause. And so I put everything down and I said, what is going on here? And it was more of an exploration of trying to make sense of the world after kind of all the structures that I had in place went away. And keep in mind, I was 14, and in terms of like a masculine initiatory culture, there goes my guide right out the window. And so I had this question of, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be somebody who can live happily? Because my dad had a good job, my dad had status. He still decided to kill himself. And so it wasn't there's not 100% correlation between job status, success, and happiness, fulfillment, and purpose from that early on stage. But it was more about studying existentialism and trying to figure out what is the purpose of existence. And then later on, it became much more somatic, understanding myself within that framework and saying, oh, my body is tired. I'm carrying around weight. I'm trying to make myself happy while trying to make a ghost happy. And I can't do both of those things at the same time. Uh, if does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean when I'm here, what's sticking out to when I hear and I think of myself at 14 or even 22 years old is something for you made you start questioning. And I think that's, the quest, literally the root word of question, right? That it's like, wait a second, something's not making sense. And I think hearing you start to ask those questions to yourself at a younger age, the what's the Tony Robbinism, like when we ask better questions we get better answers or something like that, or so often we're just drifting, most people, and I was not really asking any questions, just like, yeah, this is the thing you do, this is, and so I think hearing those questions come up and seeing how that leads to kind of how your journey unfolds is really interesting.
Yeah, it was questions and experimentation, right? So I tried a nihilist route, which is just existentialism with a shitty answer. It's like, and then I played around and explored, and that to me was the biggest teacher was I don't know the answers. And if I don't know the answers about myself, then how am I supposed to fit into this framework that's being given to me? And, in terms of the conditioning that we all receive, I'm and we'll go into the human design aspect of this, but like I am very prone to being conditioned. And so I had to really start unraveling all of that conditioning and getting to this question of who am I and how do I want to go forwards in the world?
In what stage of your plant medicine study were you like, this is part of what I want to do? Like, I want to know this and actually like guide and lead ceremonies. And then we're talking more specifically ayahuasca when we talk about plant medicine. I'm assuming. I know there's other ones that you've explored too.
It's still unfolding to be completely transparent on that. I would say early on though, I had kind of an egotistical idea of oh man, I love doing this and I'm gonna go study. And thank God I had that because it definitely propelled me on the track a little bit. And then a little bit later, after doing some more personal healing, the medicine came and told me very specifically, it is fine if you want to continue doing this work. However, if you keep doing this work, it's not going to be about you anymore. And that was a message that I took some time to sit with, but that also kind of started transforming and shifting the path and became more about understanding how ceremonial structures work, how the medicine works, how to let the medicine work through me, which is different than how it might work through you or somebody else. So it was still a self exploration, but the focus of it became multifaceted and far more outward focused in terms of being of service to others at that point.
This is something I have not shared publicly. This will be the first time people hear me talking about it that are outside of maybe some more closer circles. That I sat for the first time in ayahuasca ceremony with Michael and his teacher, Zach, not too long ago. And I had to resist every urge inside of me to not be the life coach who like talks about his first ayahuasca experience. Like I really like it was painful to resist it. And thanks to conversations with Alistair and actually letting myself receive from Alistair, which can sometimes be really hard to to receive. Alistair's been a guest on this podcast and a mutual friend of ours, but he um yeah, I had to resist every urge to share that. I'm sure at some point, when as this continues to process, there's so much I haven't been sharing personally that I normally share with people, and so just wanting to give that background because as someone who had a lot of resistance to plant medicine for a while, for I think fair reasons. I had an addiction background, and I became sober, and I just wanted to make sure that it was aligned and right. And it's, in my very limited couple year experience with different sort of plant medicines, it's been such a huge helpful tool. And since our retreat in March, things for me have felt so much more open and in flow, and I'm just so grateful for it. And so in your experience, Michael, how do you, for some people listening, a lot of people, this is going to be a brand new area for them potentially, even though they're in, I think I don't want people to do it as like a spiritual belt thing, right? Like, okay, I'm just going down the spiritual you know gauntlet, not gauntlet, but let me just do all the things. And so how do you have a litmus test for people of how they can know if they're ready or if it calls to them, other than it's probably calling to them? They know.
That's such a tricky question. I'm gonna take a different approach than I might usually take to answer it, which is, hey, if you want to win the spiritual Olympics, you're not going to win it without working with plant medicine. Hey, if you are feeling called to get that notch on your bedpost or notch on the belt on your spiritual journey, and that's what's calling you to it, okay. And you know why that's okay? Because sometimes we have to learn lessons the hard way.
Good.
And things transform over time. So look, if you're being called to work with the medicine because you just want some novel experience, right? You never know what a novel experience is going to unlock for you. And so, sure, knock on that door, but just don't think that you're going to get exactly what you asked for, because what you're asking for is something new. And if you want something new but to stay the exact same, it generally doesn't go very well. If you are feeling, on the other hand, that kind of nervous excitement around the idea of working with plant medicine and kind of scared, excited, skited is what my wife calls that term. You know, if you're feeling skited about it, that's a really healthy place to be. And if you are feeling so exhausted and so stuck with where you're at that you are just saying, I need something to break out of this pattern that I'm in, that's another great reason. And there are, I think it's Jack Hornfield who says there's as many different types of meditation as there are people on the planet. And I would put forth that there are as many different reasons to work with or not work with plant medicine as there are people on this planet. But as we are considering how do I want to approach working with the medicine, understand whether it is for personal use or if you're a therapist who wants to have the experience so you can be of greater support to others, you're still going to have your personal experience with it. There's no way without fracturing your psyche, you can say, I'm going to go and sit with ayahuasca, but I'm going to reject everything that it shows me and just put it as something external. It just doesn't work. So if you're somebody who hears a call to adventure, I'm not going to tell you to say no. I'm just going to say, hey, be prepared to go on an adventure. Pack your bags, like take the time. But even when we're called on these, I don't know why I'm going back to kind of the warning that you gave of not wanting the notch in the belt, but I think about the Iliad and the Odyssey. When Odysseus was going off to war to start and left Ithaca and goes to Troy, it was to fight and to claim glory and to do all of these things. And then the lessons and the challenges all come on the return from that journey. And it's the return that transforms him as much as it is the battle and getting those accolades. So he wouldn't have left home without that call, but it ended up being a much different lesson than he expected or intended. And so, as long as we're willing to accept the unknown, totally, totally encourage people, if it feels right to them, to explore the idea of working with ayahuasca.
I love that answer. There's almost like a part that is like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. That to have like the high, uh, I love. There's a quote by Father Thomas Keating, like the spiritual journey is one humiliation after the other. And to have this more maybe egoic, like I can't wait to do this thing because this is gonna be cool and I'm gonna transform, whatever that energy might be, and to be like so humbled in that experience could be one of the, yeah, I can see how that could be exactly what that person would need, right? If it has that energy going to it. And so when does working with human design and gene keys, and I'm just curious which comes first for you, and then we can kind of go into some more understanding about it.
Sure. Human design came in first as a concept, and that came in late 2018 as well. I wouldn't say that it stuck at that point in time. I had kind of an allergic reaction to it, if you will. And then Gene Keys came online 2019, 2020, but came in full force. And that was really useful. And then it started blending together with human design because they're interrelated systems. And so part of it was also I experienced experimented with human design more too and got some good feedback points, although I can still sometimes like to argue with that system.
So I'd love to hear if you can give a good high level frame of human design, and then also your personal story of when you found your, like how you've maybe worked with it, or how, like, or maybe early on of like, wow, this is once learned my human design, I stopped doing this and I started doing this, and it was like this immediate, like, yeah, there's something here, if that applies.
Sure. So human design is a system that combines the I Ching, astrology, the chakra system, and components of the Kabbalistic tree of life into one synthesized framework. And if you say, wow, that sounds really complex, it's because it is, or it can be. The essence of it, though, is that it's a system that tries to say, hey, this is the type of energetic vehicle that you are driving. And I do mean vehicle. So, and here's how to undo the conditioning that you've received. So, the way that I like to put this is the conditioning that we've received is, hey, everybody drives a Honda Civic. And that's just not true. And if you drive a Lamborghini and I drive a really cool off-road vehicle of some sort, you know, if you try to take your Lamborghini off-roading, things are going to go poorly. And if I try to take my off-roading vehicle onto a racetrack with you, you're going to blow me out of the water. And neither of us are driving a Honda Civic. So
Great analogy.
what human design does at its core is it tells you here's the type of vehicle that you're driving and here's the basic strategy that you can work with and here's how you can make decisions skillfully, and then you can get really complex with it. Gene keys is more, here's the adventure that that vehicle can take you on and bring you through. In terms of how human design came in to my system, it came in through plant medicine work. My teachers asked me, "Hey, have you ever heard of human design? Do you know what your human design is?" And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." We looked it up, got my chart, and in terms of human design terms, I am a reflector, which is 1% of the population. I am the sparkly unicorn that they had always been looking for. And I said, I have no idea what being a reflector means. And I looked it up, and it means that none of my energy centers are defined. We'll get into all the specifics perhaps. Um, but there was this line that said, as a reflector, you should not let anybody tell you who you are or try to put you in a box or define you. And that really resonated with me. And at the same time, I'm getting that from a system that is putting me in a box, defining me as a reflector, and saying, here's how you operate. And I said, I like it, but I don't like it. And I kind of just said, this is really complex, but I want to understand the basics. When we're working in plant medicine space, the energetic realm is very apparent. And so you can really start to see how different people's energy works. And I was running this experiment of human design at the same time that I'm in that amplified plant medicine space. And I was able to really test the theory. I was like, oh, here's that person is probably a manifester or a generator or
Oh, wait a second.
a projector.
I'll blow it away. You could feel this out like in ceremony.
I think you can get a pretty good sense of it, you know, and I think that continues to this day. And some it's an experiment, right? So I'm not saying I'm right 100% of the time. I would say I'm probably more accurate than 50%. uh, but there's also a way like, how aware of themselves is somebody, right? Because a an aware manifester is very different than an unaware manifester in terms of how their energy is being portrayed or coming out into the world to be experienced. I'm going to encounter a lot more of the not self themes from them.
Hmm.
And as a reflector, I'm just here to feel and amplify and reflect back. And so when I'm encountering somebody who's in their not self theme, it's pretty apparent and it doesn't feel that great. And it kind of breaks my heart. Or it makes me want to throw them off the side of a cliff and say, go fix yourself. That would be my unskillful part coming out, right? So yeah, there's definitely a way to feel into these energy types in the same way that I'm sure if you've had Alistair on, he can probably make decent guesses about somebody's typology and say, oh yeah, they're like an INTP or an ENFJ or whatever. It's like you're probably a generator.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much that which direction we can go around what thread of human design to take. You mentioned energy centers. You mentioned not self theme. I'm curious for people here that are in this audience of like wellness coaches or meditation teachers, and how would knowing their human design, and maybe you can even give examples of some of the design types, how could it help them? Um, Obviously, personally, that's kind of more broad, but even in the work that they're doing, like how is it a tool for that?
Sure. So the basic idea behind human design, it brings in astrology. So if you're already out of the woo-woo coaching space, don't come into human design. Um, there's going to be aspects of it that will challenge you. But essentially, when we are born, there's an imprint of time and space, like a photograph that is taken that is us at that moment. And 88 days before we were born was when the prefrontal cortex was being developed according to the human design system. And so it pulls in what the sky looked like then as well. There's 9 centers, just like there's 7 chakras. This is the human design system says, well, we are actually moving past that into a 9 centered being. And depending on how many centers are defined based off of the astrological placements from when we are born, there's different ways that our systems operate. And so these are the major types or profiles. So you can have a reflector like myself, which has zero definition in their chart. None of the centers are defined. You have projectors who don't have an energy center that acts as a motor connected to their throat. You have manifestors who have a motor system that is connected to their throat, but it's not their sacral center. And then you have generators who have a defined sacral and have this energizer bunny kind of energy to just get stuff done if they're listening to their responses. As a coach or as a meditation guide or as a therapist, anybody who's working with other people, the reason that this is helpful is like any other sort of typology or personality tool. One, it says not everybody is the same. Two, it says, hey, these are the general categories of people, and they are not intended to work in the same way energetically. So if I have a client who is a generator who has a defined sacral, that is like having a battery that is fully charged and they are consistently needing to burn that energy off. It's like 70% of the population. And so that's great. And we can dig into the specifics of their chart to see how they might best use their energy. But if they're, and I'm sorry for going too far into the weeds for those of you who are like, this is a lot, but if you have defined sacral center, just it's that gut feeling of like yes or no. And it might not even be verbal. It might just be like a sound like uh-uh or mm-hmm. And so when a sacral generator is making a decision, they really need to listen to their gut. And if they don't, they're going to spend their energy on the wrong things. For somebody like myself, who's a reflector who does not have that definition, my strategy is to take a full lunar cycle to make really big decisions in my life. And so if somebody's telling me, just listen to your gut, act quickly, go fast, that might not be the right advice for me. And in fact, that could lead to things going really poorly in my life. Or if I'm talking to a manifester and manifestors, um, in the most polite way, really, really, really don't like being told what to do. And as coaches, I think we attempt to never try to tell our clients what to do, but there is a ability to reflect back and show things to other people. And if that is breached in the wrong way with the manifester, they're gonna row their heels into the sand and they will go the other direction just to show you that they can. And so to consolidate what I'm saying, having a very simple and useful understanding of human design, if it's a tool that you want to work with, can help you figure out the best approach for you to take to your clients or with your clients based off of your own energy type, how to take the best approach to your work. If you don't have a defined energy center and a battery that is always going, maybe you're a projector, you need to learn how to work in sprints and to find the things that really, you know, resonate with you so that you're not burning out. And on the client side, it can also help you understand the client and come up with correct strategies or approaches for them. The most important thing, though, is to just understand our own type and make decisions using our authority and our strategy.
So I think couple things that all of what you shared was super supportive. And for me, when I learned about my type, which is a manifester, that's why Michael is using manifester examples. When I learned about my type, specifically when you were talking about the inner authority and not having that sacral, like I never was that gut type feeling. People would talk about like it's like this gut feeling. I was like, I never really connected with that. I thought I did because that's what I think everyone would do. But when I learned that I was, what's the type where it's like more intuitive? What's like that? It's
Are you splenic?
splenic, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, splenic, right? So which is very just very soft, like light, quick type of decisions, and I've always felt that. And so it gave me, I think, in a lot of these typings, they can make you realize like, oh, that's me. Oh, yeah, they kind of reflect back some deeper truths. And I guess a big question that I have, because I kind of so my manifestor, like the strategies, like, or is the strategy to initiate? Is that the strategy?
Your strategy is to inform.
And to inform, that's it. Okay,
Yeah.
but what I'm
Your
hearing,
authority is your spleen.
got it,
So you are a splenic authority, which is that quiet, fast, like hit of intuition. And then that's how you make your decisions. And then when you're operating, your strategy is to inform about what you are doing.
got it. And so I guess the question, what's so initiating is where's that for a manifester?
I mean, this is the thing about this system is it is speaking to the energetic dynamics of your being. It's engineering versus decision making, which
Got it.
can be frustrating. So because you have this defined throat that is connected to an energy center, um, it has a very specific message that it is pumping out there. And so in terms of initiating, like as soon as you get to that point of, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this, your energy is already putting it into motion and creating it. Yes, it's helpful to work with other people and other types, right? Because you don't have that defined sacral center. It might be really helpful to have a generator who can like do all of the things all day and you just are focused on the creation standpoint. Um, does that answer your question?
Well, it does, but that's the question I have. I think it's almost like this feeling of, oh, I maybe this is every manifestor feels like they like being, maybe I hope everyone feels like they like being their type, but I feel like, oh, but like I'm so happy I'm a manifestor, right? It feels cool. Like there's like a coolness to it. I can bring new things into the world and say, screw the rules. I'm just gonna do whatever I want to do. Then
To a
and
degree.
yeah, of course. But when I think of and I know a generator who creates a lot and is like so creative and bringing things into the world. So I think that's the question. Is like sometimes I think manifestors are the one that bring new things into the world. And so when I work with projectors, generators, manifesting generators, actually I know the least about in some ways. What's that? If I'm a projector listening to this, and I'm wanting to like I have an idea for something I want to create. Like I think the common question is like, do I need to wait? Like do I not do this thing that feels like I want to do? Like I think that's where I get a little bit like where it feels limiting, like for that person, right? Where
Mm,
I need to wait for someone to tell me I can do this or invite me to do this. Like how does someone like a projector grapple with that?
yeah. So a projector's strategy is to wait for the invitation, which is why I think you're bringing up the like struggle that can be there. Look, this system is not designed to limit you, first and foremost. It is designed as an experiment. And also, it's definitely not designed to say that only manifestors can be creative. We are all creative beings. For projectors, when it is something that applies to your own life, like, and isn't you telling other people what to do, you don't really have to wait for the invitation. And technically, you never have to wait for the invitation as a projector. Just see what happens when you wait for the invitation versus when you don't. How are you received? How does that play out? And one of the things that I've read recently that I really, really loved because I'm married to a projector, um, is the answer to that question of I don't like waiting for the invitation, right? Well, first of all, welcome to the club. Nobody likes following their strategy to begin with. I mean, we can fall in love with it, but we don't like it to begin with. Oh, I have to inform people about what I'm doing. That feels like I'm asking for permission. Manifestors don't like that until they figure it out. Um, I like to move quickly. So taking time to slow down and allow myself to feel throughout this entire process over the course of a lunar cycle, not always my favorite thing. You know, Responding and listening to that gut yes or no from a generator side, like it might be really cool. And they might want to say yes, but if their body says no, they have to trust that. Well, the mind is telling you something's cool, but your body's saying no. That is a learned skill set. For projectors, you're waiting for the invitation to share your genius with others. So the question is, what do you do in the meantime? You don't wait, you prepare. And as you prepare, you are going to be doing the things that you love, that you're skilled in. You're going to continue to cultivate and develop your own natural talents and follow your passions. You're going to create the things on your own end, and people will see that. They'll be motivated by it, and then they will invite you to share that wisdom.
Okay, I got it now.
So if you're just hanging out there, pissed off at the world, as a projector, living your not self theme of bitterness, and you're like, I'm so bitter that nobody's giving me the invitation, that you're not preparing and showing those gifts because that's just who you are and how you want to be. That's really unfortunate for everybody, but it's going to be the most painful for yourself.
That's really helpful to not. It's not that you're preparing. That's yeah, that's spot on. So I think that can be really supportive for for projectors and in some ways generators too, right? Because like they're waiting to respond, but they're also doing things, in that way.
Yeah, I mean, we can all prepare. Like following your design does not mean that you can't live your life in the meantime. You know, when I'm making decisions over a 28-day period, I go back and forth. I talk about it. There's still energy moving its way through. And at the end of 28 days, it's not so much as I've made the decision as the decision is just very clear at that point. But in the meantime, it's not like I'm just like, I have to make a decision in 28 days and I'm not going to think about it or engage with it until then. Or I need to respond to something. So I'm just going to not look around me and find something until there's something big enough that I can respond to. Any system that doesn't call us more fully into life, that doesn't call us to engage with life, is a very dangerous system in my view. And there is a trap in almost any system or any methodology, whether it's ayahuasca and saying, oh, I'm going to keep on going to ceremony over and over and over and over again so that I never actually have to integrate or look at these things or take that knowledge back and share it, that's a trap. Or whether it's human design or gene keys, where we can get stuck at the mental level and say, I like to understand all the details, but I never actually want to follow it or play with the experiment. You know, the entire idea is if we don't, in human design at least, is if we don't follow our strategy and our authority, we are going to end up living out our not self theme. And that's neither good nor bad. The not self theme for a manifester is anger. And so if I was a manifester and I'd never allowed myself to feel anger, because that that wouldn't be useful. And if I got angry at the fact that I was feeling angry, also not that useful. But if I can recognize, oh, I'm feeling angry, that is a great indication that I'm not listening to my design or my structure in some way, shape, or form. Then I can take the corrective action and say, thank you, anger, for showing me like where I'm not listening to myself. Or thank you, bitterness. Thank you, disappointment.
Mm.
Thank you, fear. And so we can start navigating all aspects of ourselves much more skillfully and bring in all of ourselves to the picture instead of just this, oh, I'm so nice and spiritual and holy, and I'm a coach or I'm a meditation facilitator and guide who doesn't have any human things going on. No, we do have human things going on. And if we can navigate that skillfully, then we can help our clients navigate that skillfully. And that requires patience, making mistakes, understanding the same things that we want ideally to share self compassion, which is what we want to share with our clients and empower them to find for themselves.
It's fascinating to think about like 10 or 12 years ago. Anger's and that would be my not self theme, but I actually have a tough time with anger, really experiencing anger. But I remember if I think back 10 or 12 years ago, it wouldn't be this rage. Like it would never be rage, like I was really angry, but I would have this low level anger of that I couldn't really quite understand that would show up. And I would typically just drink more, and that would be like not the best thing to do with that. And yeah, so it's like understanding that and how knowing my knowing what I do now, even before I knew human design, of how much, oh, like yeah, that makes a lot of sense why I was feeling like that anger was showing up. Who's this disappointment?
Reflectors.
Reflectors. Okay.
Yeah. So each type has a not self theme and a self theme. So for manifestors, it is anger and peace. For reflectors, it's disappointment and surprise,
Hmm.
which is really great. My little trap that I make for myself is I'm just surprised at how disappointed I'm capable of feeling. And that's not a good place to be. It's like authentic surprise comes in when I actually stop holding on to things, when I can let go of that expectation, because disappointment only comes about through expectation. And so, as an undefined, it's nothing in my chart is defined, for example. If I'm looking for there to be definition in my chart and expecting there to be consistency in how I approach things, I'm going to be disappointed because it's just not there. And that's really frustrating. And I could be bitter and angry about it. So we can all experience all of these themes. Or I can soften and let go and be surprised about what actually comes through when I do that. You know, like take projectors, it's bitterness and success. It's like I'm so bitter that nobody's giving me this invitation to like be who I am and to recognize my skills. You know, it's very important that their skills are recognized and that they get oftentimes the validation that they need. And if they prepare instead of just waiting around twiddling their thumbs, and if they just live their lives being them, doing the things that they are passionate about, that invitation comes. And it's not always clear and direct, like, I'm inviting you to do this, you know, but the opportunity presents itself and they're welcomed. And because they're not chasing the invitation, they're not saying yes to invitations that they're really a no to, which is where they waste energy that they don't really have to waste as much. Um, or when, as a manifester, I'd be curious to like when you were able to just start letting people know what you're doing instead of asking them for permission to do it. How did that change?
Yeah, I mean it's was kind of like the whole beginning of my whole journey of getting to where I am now. It was just like this is what I'm doing, and I kind of just kept doing that thing until it somehow finally, started working in some different ways. Um, so I'd love us to maybe transition or maybe evolve or unfold into gene keys, right? So taking this
Sure.
human design into and if maybe if you have a couple extra minutes, because I don't know if we can, maybe do a good summary in 8 minutes, but maybe we can spend a couple extra minutes if that's okay with you, Michael,
Yeah, for sure.
uh, around this is now I have some sense of human design. So now I'm kind of really taking a step back and being like, I've kind of read different my gene keys. Like it's just a lot of numbers and I don't, yeah, take, how is this the adventure? Like where does, because it seems like this really makes you come alive and this in some ways is like more spark for you than human design. Correct me if that's false.
I think that's true for me. I mean, it definitely came alive and started speaking to me in its own way. Um, so the Gene Keys is an evolution from human design, and it's its own separate thing. I think I said this earlier, but if human design is the car, then Gene Keys is the adventure that that car is designed to go on. And so there's three there's a thing within the Gene Keys called the golden path, and it's comprised of three sequences. There's the activation sequence, which is your genius here in this world. There's the Venus sequence, which is really how relationships are your teacher, but it's all about the incarnation process and how you were conditioned through that and a key to unwinding your core wound. And then there's the pearl sequence, which is how you unlock your prosperity and prosperity not being just financial success, but like to actually prosper with every atom of your being. Um, and so they all work together, and there's parallels between, it's not even parallels, they're interwoven. So in human design, you'll hear talk about something called an incarnation cross. And what the incarnation cross is, it's just looking at where was the sun and earth when you were born, and where was the sun and earth 88 days before you were born. And they were in one of the 64 gates of the I Ching in the sky. And those specific combinations come together to form your incarnation cross in human design and your activation sequence in the gene keys. And the way that I like to view gene keys, because it can be the guy who founded it is a poet by nature. and it's already a technical system and a synthesis of many things. So when you take poetic language and a complicated system, it can feel quite overwhelming. And it is. The nice thing though is that there's so many different entry points and access points to that system that you can find somewhere to start digesting it. You don't have to eat the whole plate at once. And I like to view it as kind of a playground, a jungle gym of contemplation that it gives you the tools and gives you the seeds of, hey, here's some things to think about, but has an approach that's not just based in thinking, but that takes the thought and turns it into emotion and turns it into eventually a physical state of being. So the idea being that if you contemplate stillness long enough, you will become still. Or if you contemplate, I don't know why they're all escaping me right now. If I contemplate beauty long enough, like I will start seeing beauty everywhere. But
And when you say contemplate, just defining, right, because
mhm,
there's the contemplation in a more mystical sense, which is kind of like a meditation in some ways, and then there's the contemplation in like a theoretical sense, which like I think about the thing all the time.
yeah, and so this is definitely more of the mystical understanding. And I would say that contemplation, thank you for calling me on it, is a word that is overused and underdescribed. And so within the meditation field, and most of your audience would probably acknowledge this, right? There's two general forms of meditation. There's active meditation, which can involve things like visualization, concentration, other things like that. And then there's receptive meditations. In the Gene Keys context, there is meditation, no mind, and then there's concentration, single focused mind. Contemplation is where those two spaces overlap. And so it's like holding a jewelry box that has many different folds on it, kind of running your hand over it, allowing the mind to feel into it, keeping its focus there, but gently. And then it will find something, and that unlocks a new perspective. And the core book, if people are like, Gene Keys sounds interesting, but I mean, damn, this is a complicated system and a little bit woo woo, and I don't know what if I want to go that far. You know, Richard Rudd, the founder, has written many books on the Gene Keys. They're mostly pretty darn thick. His smallest book, which is like 98 pages, is called The Art of Contemplation, and it is the key to unlocking the entire system. And so it puts together a approach to contemplation that comes in three phases. Phase one, pause, like just as a practice. And within that pause can come insight. So when you're at the red light and you're yelling at the dude in front of you for having slammed on their brakes and you're impatient, running late to work, you don't have to say no to it. Just pause it. Give My wife describes the pause, and I actually think it's helpful. It's like giving yourself permission to actually look at what is happening in your energetic body at that point in time without being attached to it. So just step into the observer role, but pause the action. And from that place, we are able to pivot. And that's phase two. It starts as mental pause. The pivot is emotional. I've been relating to this thing this way, and I can't force it to shift, but sometimes the shift just comes in. And now I've pivoted and it feels different. And then the third stage of contemplation is merging, where not only do I relate to it differently, but I'm embodying those lessons and taking them forwards because I'm not just feeling them. They are natural. They have merged with my being. And so if we put it in the terms of like behavior change, right? And the are you in pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, or maintenance? By the time that we get to merging, we're in maintenance. In terms of the actual pre-contemplation and contemplation are the pausing, or pre-contemplation, we're not pausing. Contemplation and preparation, we're in that pause state. And then the action is coming around the I've pivoted, I'm feeling it, I'm working with it, but it hasn't fully just become ingrained and natural to me yet.
And so, for example, using like beauty, would that be a different, would you work with it through that like framework, or is this more for when things like trigger you?
Yes. So each gene key has a shadow state, a gift state, and a citic state, or a spiritual awakened state. And it's the same energy, just operating at different frequencies. And we all have all 64 gene keys, but there's certain ones that are more prevalent in our chart. Um, and working or looking at your gene keys profile is helpful to understand which themes might be more resonant with you. Beauty is part of the first gene key. It's the citic kind of divine state of it. The shadow state is entropy, and the gift state is freshness. And as humans, we're here to like really get to the gift, So at the shadow state of beauty, everything is always changing. There's nothing that we can hold on to. And so we try to hold on to it. And it's it's so much change all the time that we end up having to numb ourselves out. And there's we want there to be energy in the system, but because we're trying to hold on, there's only entropy. We can only see the things that are slipping through our fingers. At the gift state, yeah, things are still slipping through our fingers, but oh, there's always something fresh that's there. There's always something new coming. There's always a new flavor or a new scent that we can engage with. And then at the citic level, it would be, and Richard, it would just be like the essence of beauty, that is indescribable, holding on and letting go. In Richard Rudd's kind of audiobook versions, he tells this story of this monk who had a student, and the student went to go study with Lao Tzu, and they were studying in silence, doing everything, eating in silence, reading in silence. And one morning they went up to the mountain to watch the sunrise. And the student was so overwhelmed by the sheer beauty and magnificence of the sun coming up that he uttered one single word: beautiful. And then they walked back down the mountain, they finished up their time, and the student went home. Fast forward, the student's teacher is talking with Lao Tzu, and they're chatting over tea. And this teacher asks, what did you think of the student? And Lao Tzu ponders it for a while. Then he says, talkative fellow. And so, this is great in the ayahuasca space because people are like, can you describe the beauty or the lessons or what did you learn from ayahuasca? And it is this ineffable thing that sometimes putting even a single word to it can destroy or cheapen that experience. And at the same time, we're human. And so we want to put these words around these things.
We do
And so
podcasts and stuff.
exactly. And we say, what are the gene keys? What are these systems that are pointing to the moon, telling us, go to the moon? Um, and so for me, in my use of words, beauty is that sunset before anything's or sunrise, before any words are said. It's that essence of things coming and going and not being able to manage them. And as that arises as a creative impulse within us, can we allow it to come and express itself and shine? It's the first hexagram in the I Ching. It is called the creative. Let's create. And then can we let it go so the new thing can come in? And I can think about that all day. But if I'm not embodying it, if I'm not living it, then I'm not there. And so when I talk about contemplation, I mean, can I play with looking at myself holding on to things and my own tension and wishing that I could hold on so tightly? And then can I also let it go and see what comes through and be new and fresh and beautiful? And understanding all these systems to the best of my ability, these are archetypal energies and patterns that exist in the universe. And so when I'm working with clients as a coach, the ability to understand these archetypal dynamics, how they play out, and find an awareness of where somebody might be on that spectrum of frequency, it allows me to use the words that are like energetic acupuncture needles and say, what is beauty to you when somebody's stuck in their doldrums and feeling numb? Or it's like, tell me what sensitivity really means to you. Tell me what restraint is all about. Tell me what celebration is. Celebration is, I'm pretty sure, a city. um, so there, yeah, it can be used to unlock these things.
So there's an inside joke with celebration that we won't have time for here, but I feel like this is thank you so much. That was so well said, and also maybe you were channeling some Richard Rudd because it felt poetic and just really in the stream. And so I felt that, and I'm sure people listening could feel that. And um, something that I think I love. One of the things I love about this podcast, and I don't know if there's a personality, if there's anything to point to personality. And I should be saying like this can all be so limiting. Don't let it limit you. Like we said, there's some people that just get so everything is through the filter of, oh, this person's this and this person's this and how we relate to that. Get like, don't do that. Don't be that person. um, but one of the things that is deeply fulfilling, obviously I do coaching and mentoring, and obviously when people work with me, that's so fulfilling and that's supportive and honestly helps me make a business for sure. And there's this other kind of fulfillment that I get, that when someone comes on this podcast, people hear about them, they go into their world and they do coaching with them, or they go on a retreat with them, or they're just in their world now and they're getting a lot of value. Like that is on some level of fulfillment that I'm just starting to really understand how much I enjoy that, and how
Mm.
much it means to me. So, Miguel, where can people, what do you have coming up? I know you think you have a retreat coming up in November. So please, yeah, feel free to share about some of the things you're doing and where they can go deeper if they want to do some gene keys or coaching with you.
Cool. So if people want to work with ayahuasca and feel called to sit with me, we are doing a retreat in Costa Rica in November, and that will be 3 ayahuasca ceremonies over 7 nights with dancing, movement, nature, that dangerous word, contemplation, and some other practices mixed into the fold. And the intention of that retreat is really, it's called Dance of the Sacred. And it's really based around reminding people, not teaching, reminding people that their true essence is already sacred, and inviting in the question of how would your life change if you knew that to be true? In terms of coaching and other things, I offer a mixture of energy work and coaching, utilizing my abilities as a reflector to provide a clear reflection in the mirror. And so if you're looking in the mirror recently and you don't love what you've seen, and you're ready to go on a journey to step into who you authentically are meant to be and you feel like it's time to blossom, then sign on up for the journey of alchemy at my website, www.alchemyshift.com. We can also mix in energy work and the gene keys or a variety of other things. And if you're saying, wow, Michael, that feels like a lot, I don't even know where to start, sign on up for a purposeful path call. We'll chat, it's free. And whether it's working with me or whether it's gene keys, human design, or none of those things, it's a 30-minute call to help you get unstuck and find the next step on your path to being authentic and real. And again, all of that can be found on my website, alchemyshift.com.
Such a great domain name. I can't believe you got alchemyshift.com. I can't believe that was you could probably flip that domain and stick out your domain entrepreneurs. Um, Thanks, Michael. Man, I so appreciate having this conversation. And to everyone listening, hope you enjoyed as much as I did. I will see you soon on another episode. Take care, friends.